Hi everyone, today's fly is my version of what I loosely call my hare's ear nymph. I say loosely because the abdomen and thorax are actually a mix of hare's ear, hare's mask and pearl eye stub. But it's a fly that I've had a lot of success with in the past, so I hope you like it. So I've got a hook already in the vise with a bead added, and I'm starting the thread just behind the bead and winding down the hook shank to secure the thread to the hook. And then I'll cut away the waste and then take a few more wraps and stop just before the bend of the hook, and then we're ready to add the tail. A good source for tail fibres can be the longer feathers on some capes that don't often get used by us trout fishermen, like the ones on this natural cape. I think that the soft fibres on these feathers are ideal for the tails on my nymphs. So for this fly I'm going to remove one of these long feathers, and to prepare it I'm just going to strip away the furry fibres at the base, and then I'll stroke a few fibres out at about 90 degrees to the stem so that the tips line up. So I'll decide how many fibres I need for the tail, stroke them out and line the tips up, and once I'm happy with that I can pull them away from the stem and we've got our tail. Another handy thing about these feathers is once I've used all the fibres I want, I can save the tips, and they come in quite handy when tying North Country spiders. So now we're back to tying our nymph. So I've stripped the fibres from the feather. Now I'm going to hold them up against the hook to gauge the length of the tail, hold them against the hook and fasten them in. They may be a touch too long, so I'll just undo it and refasten them again. I want the tail to be about the same length as the abdomen and thorax, minus the bead. Snip that bit away, and now I'm going to attach the rib. So I'll hold the copper wire up against the side of the hook and fasten that in, and now I'm going to come up the hook shank and fasten down the wire and the stub of the tail to tidy that up. Come back down to the bend, and now we're ready for our abdomen. As I mentioned at the start, the abdomen and thorax are a mix of hare's ear, hare's mask and pearl eye stub, and I'm going to twist this mix onto the thread quite tightly, and then I'm going to work my way up the hook shank with the dubbed thread and form a tapered abdomen as I go. So we'll just work up towards the bead, and we're going to stop 2 or 3 millimeters short of the bead, so we've got an area left to form the thorax. We'll just add a touch more dubbing to thicken that area up and make that taper more pronounced. That's fine, and now we can rib the abdomen. So we'll take the wire and we're just going to work our way again back up towards the bead in equally spaced open turns. And once we get into that area behind the bead, we'll just fasten the wire off and remove the stub. Try not to use your good scissors for cutting wire, or you'll soon blunt them. I always have an old pair handy. If there's a little stub of wire sticking up, just flatten it so it's not sticking up when you form your thorax. And now we're going to add some more dubbing mix to the thread, and this time I'm not going to wind it onto the thread so tight. I want this dubbed quite loosely, because once the thorax is formed I'm going to use a velcro brush to pick out the fibres. So we'll wind that on tight in behind the bead and just fill that area up. That's it, and you can see now we've got quite a loosely dubbed thorax with a few fibres sticking out, and we're just going to take the velcro brush and pick out some more fibres. So we'll just pick away with the brush and stroke them back towards the bend of the hook. come all the way around the hook underneath as well, and just pick out those fibres and stroke them back. Once that's done, occasionally you'll get a gap behind the bead. If you do, take a few wraps to fill that in, and then once you're happy, you can do a 4 or 5 turn wick finish to finish the fly off and remove the thread. Again, as usual, I'll control that loop with the scissors as I pull it in, snip away the thread, and now I'll tidy the fly up by just cutting away 1 or 2 stray fibres. There's one there sticking out the front, I'll get rid of that. I don't want the fibres that I've stroked back protruding too far beyond the bend of the hook, so I'll just snip away any long fibres, and then once I'm finished I can take some varnish and finish the fly off. So I'm just going to take a bit of varnish now and just varnish that thread to seal it. So that's it, finished, and that's my current version of the Hare's Ear Nymph. I'll give it a little twirl in the vise and you can see it from different angles. We all have our favourite flies, and this is one of mine. I've often said if I was only allowed one nymph, it would be the Hare's Ear, as long as I could have it in different sizes and different weights, and with or without beads. I tie it with different coloured beads because in my experience bead colour does matter depending on the light conditions and water clarity. But if you do decide to try it, I hope it works for you.